Hello, I'm Jesse Berger, founder and artistic director of Red Bull Theater. I hope this finds you and yours safe and healthy. Thank you for joining us tonight for this remarkable Podversation. These informal conversations investigate approaches to essential passages from the Shakespearean and Jacobean canon and beyond, with some of the finest actors working in the classical theater today. Next Monday at 7:30, we will continue our Red Bull Theater live series of online readings, reuniting members of the original companies of some of our previous off-Broadway productions, with The Witch of Edmonton, featuring Charlene Woodard. All of us at Red Bull are grateful to be able to offer these new ways to share experiences with our community of artists and theater lovers during this unprecedented time. Tonight, we are especially grateful to the super talented Elizabeth Marvel for being our Podversation guest. I've been a fan of this terrific actor since I first saw her as a truly remarkable Rosalind in Garland Wright's stunning production of As You Like It at the Guthrie Theater, and she's been astounding audiences with her ferocious talent ever since. I hope you enjoyed tonight's conversation. We're all looking forward to your feedback, which you can email to us at feedback@redbulltheater.com. And now I'm very pleased to introduce your host, Red Bull's wonderful associate producer, Nathan Winkelstein.
Hi, Jesse. Thank you. And thank you, everybody who is joining us here on Zoom, on Facebook Live, on Red Bull's website, and on Vimeo. This is RemarkaBULL Podversations, and I am your host, Nathan Winkelstein. This programming has been created to provide insight into some of the greatest minds in classical theater. We hope that this is a fun and entertaining and informal look into the level of depth, specificity, and passion that these artists bring to their craft every day. Tonight's RemarkaBULL Podversation is focused on Mark Antony's other famous speech from Julius Caesar. For those of you who don't know what speech that is, or for those of you who do know what speech that is but think that I should remind the people who don't, this is the speech that Mark Antony says over the body of his mentor and dictator for life of Rome, Julius Caesar. Mark Antony has just arrived at the aftermath of the assassination, and in order to save his own life, and perhaps for other ends, has made peace with the assassins, Brutus, Cassius, and the others, and has shaken their bloody hands as they slowly file out of the arena and leave Mark Antony alone with the body. Alone is important. This is the first time we've seen Mark Antony alone. This is the last time we see Mark Antony alone in this play. And that provides a very unique opportunity for audience and the actor playing Mark Antony alike to see who this person is when they are by themselves, when they are not performing for others, when they are not wearing a mask, their true selves. This is a gift that Shakespeare provides an actor to provide true insight into the character they are playing. And I thought it would be very interesting to discuss what that insight might allow us to discover with the actor who played this role in 2017 in Central Park. She is one of the great classical actors of this country. She is a star on Broadway and on television. She is, of course, the wonderful Beth Marvel.
Oh, pardon me, thou bleeding piece of earth, that I am meek and gentle with these butchers. Thou art the ruins of the noblest man that ever lived in the tide of times. Woe to the hand that shed this costly blood. O'er thy wounds now do I prophesy, which like dumb mouths do ope their ruby lips to beg the voice and utterance of my tongue. A curse shall light upon the limbs of men. Domestic fury and fierce civil strife shall cumber all the parts of Italy. Blood and destruction shall be so in use and dreadful objects so familiar that mothers shall but smile when they behold their infants quartered with the hands of war, all pity choked with custom of fell deeds, and Caesar's spirit ranging for revenge with Ate by his side, come hot from hell, shall in these confines and with a monarch's voice cry havoc, and let slip the dogs of war, that this foul deed shall smell above the earth with carrion men groaning for burial.
I didn't even want to turn my video on after that. Wow. Well, thank you, Beth.
You're welcome. And now for a little light patter.
I knew that this was the right speech to choose. Well, thank you very much. Let me just get rid of this. Thank you very, very much. As I mentioned briefly just before introducing you, you played this role in, I don't know what the best adjective is for it, certainly the most notable production of the last few years. And
in a while, yes. Yes.
Highly controversial production as well. This was the one in 2017 in the park.
Yes.
After our last presidential election, where the
summer after the election.
Yeah.
Shortly on the heels of the election.
And Julius Caesar was of course portrayed as a Trumpian figure.
Yes, like completely. Red tie, bad hairpiece, all of it. Yes.
Yeah. And I mean, of course, this is primarily about craft and an actor's mind when it comes to craft. But of course, craft is not actually separable in acting to the public response of a piece. In fact, you could argue that in Shakespeare, especially, those are they can almost not exist without one another, and in live theater in general. And the audience response to this particular production was so extraordinary. I wonder if you could at least speak for a little bit about what that experience was like performing in front of these crowds with these news cycles, etc.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, when you do the park, like the baseline is like a rock and roll concert anyway, you know? So it's always a blast and it's always wild. But because of the nature of what the director chose to do by giving it this contemporary context and making it such a sort of making Caesar such a volatile character, it definitely lit the fuse of the moment. And then it was further exacerbated by, I don't know if you know the news, I don't know if you'd call them a news outlet or a propaganda machine or whatever you may view it as, but Breitbart got wind while we were still in previews before we opened, like early on, like our third performance, I think, of that the direction of the play had decided that to portray Caesar as Trump and his wife as Melania, and Octavius sort of as a Jared Kushner type of character. So Breitbart put out a reward for anyone that could either stop the show or take one of us down. They would get $1,000 if they could do it and get a picture of it. So then it became a whole nother level of intensity and audience engagement. And the show was, you know, we were they were succeeding. I mean, they took many of us down. It's so wild to be performing and have someone come running at you, screaming, because also we're a very weaponized culture, and the park doesn't have metal detectors. So it definitely created an immediacy to the play that, I mean, it was a little like performing for one's life, you know, there were not, I mean, we would take a vote every night before we did the show once this started happening, because also then Donald Trump Jr. started tweeting about it and supporting what people were doing by trying to stop the show and assaulting the actors. And so we would take a vote every night whether we would perform the show or not. And every night we just collectively agreed to do it. And we had security guards everywhere. We had security guards escorting us in and out of the park, and we had dogs in the bombs, and, you know, the theater definitely supported us and supported our decision whether to perform or not. You know, I definitely never felt any pressure about doing the show. And I think I can speak for the company. The theater completely supported us, but, you know, we were a team, and it's an amazing thing when you're in a play that speaks to the moment so clearly. And of course, you know, the great irony is that if any of these people had actually read the play or knew the play, they would know that the message of the play is, you know, you kill the tyrant and democracy dies. So if you follow the sentence to the end, you'd understand that actually the message of the play is that, you know, that's the downfall is to do what they do in the play. But I don't think many of the folks that were struggling with us understood the full scope of the play and the story of the play. But it's also fascinating because I think I told you a little bit, when I started as an actor, I began, the first plays I did was at Juilliard. I came to Juilliard without any experience. And my mentor there was a man named Michael Langham, who sadly is no longer with us, but he was the head of the drama department, and he was my mentor. He sort of plucked me out of my class and would work with me on verse one-on-one all the time, and then gave me my first job at Stratford. But his beginning of doing theater was he was he was a prisoner of war during the Second World War, and started directing Shakespeare for the guards with the other POWs to stay alive. So for him, his relationship to Shakespeare was life and death. And I was sort of forged on this anvil of like that kind of immediacy and intensity and relationship to this language, and how it is like life and death. And so being in this production where that was actually a daily experience, really realizing that and how relevant and immediate these plays are, was amazing.
I know also this is a question from one of our viewers, Kit, know that you've also worked with Evo,
Yeah.
who it seems, where does he fit in this, in your how has he affected you compared to these other extreme experiences? Because of course Evo is his own interesting experience.
Extreme experience. I love working with Evo so much, and he had a massive, you know, I've been so fortunate to work with so many awesome directors over the course of my life so far. And so many of them, you know, Garland Wright, Joanne Akalaitis, Evo, there are just so many, Markwing Davey, you know, I could just go on and on. Evo and I are a great fit. I got to do a bunch of shows with Evo. I haven't done any Shakespeare with Evo yet, although I love what he does with Shakespeare. I love it. I've loved all of the productions I've seen of his company do Shakespeare. And and someday I'd like to, but once I started working with Ivo, now I apply that way of working to everything I do. He really taught me to come in fully loaded, like day one, be off book, be on your feet, move, dive, like jump, leap, just go right away. And before I went into a room with him, I was never encouraged to do that, to just hurl yourself against the wall right away. And once I started doing that with him, I realized, oh, that's what I do. That's how I do this. And ever since then, that's how I do it. And it's a little like, I remember the first time I did Streetcar with him, was the first play I did with Ivo, and it was very revelatory for me. And because also, like, I remember Chris Welch was playing Mitch, and it's the scene when Mitch offers Blanche a cigarette and she notices the cigarette case. And we were rehearsing it, and Chris was like, Ivo, I need a cigarette case. You know, can we talk to props? And I want to know what it's going to look like. And Ivo looked at him very perplexed and was like, but you are the cigarette case. There is no cigarette case. You are the cigarette case. You're talking about yourself. And it was like, of course. Yes, yes. So once I started working in that territory, which makes complete sense to me and makes me so happy. I remember doing the next play that wasn't with Ivo. And I remember thinking, oh, I remember reading about when astronauts came back from the moon and they had to readjust to like the scale and like sitting in a chair at a table again. And I felt that way. It took me a while to sort of adjust to gravity again.
Right. Well, I mean, I have to say, between talking about the life and death, the wildness of Central Park, and then jumping in full flow, I feel like that's a perfect transition into this piece, and also into what you just did with it. Thank you again for that. Of like, it's such an interesting piece because you've only ever met Mark Antony in sort of this one way.
Yeah.
And they're alone on stage, and you see this just complete other side of them. And
Totally.
I'm curious to both, this is maybe a complex question, but both for you as the actor doing the homework of who this character is, how this reaction informed your character, and also how do you think it informs, when doing it, informs the audience about this character? Because this is a very different speech from his other one, which feels very political in some ways. This is very personal.
Yes, but I think that's why Friends, Romans, Countrymen works, because Mark Antony has that direct conduit to the heart. I think that was a big key that opened for me working on this character, because again, I really struggled in this production. I really struggled in the rehearsal process, because if you make Caesar a Trumpian foil character, and that is the world, then who the fuck is Mark Antony? Who the fuck is Mark Antony? And every, you know, I wasn't gonna like imitate Sarah Huckabee Sanders, although I definitely stole a few things from her. But you know, you need to dive a lot deeper to be able to do that oration. And what I realized was, it's also the thing that makes this the power of what we're seeing in our country right now, and this huge like turmoil and upheaval is it's not politics. It's an investment of the soul and the spirit and the heart. There's so much identification happening, and projected identification. And I think the thing that also gives Mark Antony, this is just my opinion, but so much power and drive and just innate ability to go and keep going and hold them in the palm of his hand, is that he's being true to himself. In his heart, he is a true believer. He's a true believer that he loves this man, Caesar. He loves him and fully believes in the righteousness of his cause and will do anything to further the cause. And I think the cost of seeing him dead on the floor in front of him absolutely breaks his heart. And this is a warrior, you know, someone who understands the cost of life and has taken life, and you know, is a partier. And we've seen the facility, the facilness and the fun, and you know, we've had just little glimpses, but they're fun, and they're facile, and they're very game, very social. And then we see the rug pulled out and the devastation of the human being and the heartbreak of the human being, and then the rage, the unstoppable rage and fury rise.
Prophecy to the yeah.
You
know, it's interesting. I'm thinking about. I feel like I have been not corrected, but won over. I've seen this production a number of times, and I think sometimes perhaps even I just said that I sort of saw his latter speech as political first and true second. And please correct me if I'm putting words incorrectly in your mouth, but basically you're saying, no, it's true first and political way second. And of course, it's sort of the exact point of this conversation is, what does the private moment teach us? Is the politician who takes advantage of the situation to rile up the crowd and gain power might be the dude we'd think he was if not for this speech. If this speech didn't exist, he might be that guy. But to the point of like what this tells us, and I'm just discovering this now because I've actually always thought of him as a little bit more politically manipulative, is that if we really do go, why is this piece here? What is Shakespeare telling us? What is there to learn? Is that no, this person is a true believer to the deepest level and will do anything they can to get revenge, including taking power and causing war. But that's not the goal. That's secondary to revenge.
That's my belief. And that was how I found my way into it and through it, was connecting through the heart. Like profoundly through the heart. Because even the scene that precedes this, when I come in and say, "Almighty Caesar, dost thou lie so low?" You know, and then deal with the assassins. I keep going back. Mark Antony keeps going back to Caesar and weeping over his body. So I mean, yes, I guess you could play that as a ploy, as a, you know, a trick. But I found to just speak the words and be true about finding someone you hold in the highest esteem with the deepest love and devotion, you know, bloody on the floor, is absolutely devastating. And that was what unlocked it for me, was just, where is the heart? Also, you know, I mean, for me, just having it be a mind game, to live in the mind, there's just, the language is so epic and rageful. And that comes from a very deep place within. You know, that's not just a power game.
What do you think is it her, I'm going to use that pronoun because it's you,
Yeah.
and for me,
Yeah.
his is because now I think of you as that part. But is it her, some combination of her military experience and the level to which she is feeling things that causes this particular imagery? I mean, the imagery is immense. Like, talking about children being quartered, being torn apart, is they're just extraordinary images for this person to be pulling up. And did you assume that
Well, and of course, you know, the military call of cry havoc, which is something generals would do at the end of battles when they've won. They would scream cry havoc. They'd cry havoc to their soldiers, which would mean the battle's won, and now you can pillage and plunder and enjoy the spoils of war, which is, yeah, it's an old sort of end of battle cry.
Wow.
To signal the soldiers, now you can have at it. We've won, you can have at it.
Not even about war, it's about the imagery is even worse. It's about the after war
pillaging, taking it all, destroying it, raping it, stealing it, burning it. It's pure destruction. And yeah, that's why it's havoc, and which is a word that has kept the same meaning since, you know, medieval times. And then of course, you know, and letting slip the dogs of war, which is, you know, letting them slip their collars, letting them loose, which is extends the metaphor, you know, cry havoc, release the dogs to then go and create chaos.
Now, much of the imagery that he uses in that they use in that speech, the mothers grieving, the children being torn apart, or the mothers not grieving, right? That's the thing, is it's been so
right. Exactly.
Was there, I assume that a female general, a woman general, might actually have a different.
The cost is just so, it's a completely different metaphor. Absolutely. Especially as, you know, because as actors, we've had, so as actors, you are whatever it is you say you are, I think. I think the stage is a magic space. I think the theater is a magic space. So whatever you say you are and whatever you say it is what it is. So I am Mark Antony, and Mark Antony is a mother, because I am a mother, you know. So there's some reason, there's some source in there that understands what I'm saying when I say mothers will smile when they behold their children butchered. That it's not, that's why to me, the cost and the grief, there's a grief, there's a cost, there's a pain at saying this speech to me. It resonates in such a horrific and tragic way that it's not, it's rage, but it's rage at a cost. It's even a deeper rage, which is also why I think when you get to the next movement of the funeral oration, there's such a further way to travel to move from the depths of the cost of what she is summoning here. Because it's a curse, it's an incantation, it's you know, it's almost black magic. I mean, I'm a little freaked out that we're reciting it right now because it's a little freaky, you know. It's the same like when I did the Scottish play. There's certain plays with certain language that, you know, you're using some black magic when you're speaking it. And every night at this particular moment in the play would always be, it was wild because I was alone on stage except with the actor who was lying covered in blood with a coat over his head. But I was basically, you know, alone on a very dark stage in the middle of Central Park, in the middle of New York City, doing this crazy incantation. And it, you know, these words are ancient and powerful. But I digress, I'm sorry.
The point is digression. That's the point. It's one of the things that I always find is one of the more important aspects of Shakespeare that we perhaps have trouble engaging with today, is that these people aren't praying to God or prophesying. They're praying to God and they're prophesying. They're right. It's real. It's a real thing to make prophecy or to make an incantation. There are stakes, and that like the one speech is here and one speech is here. The one that matters is here. So it's very cool to hear. I can imagine, especially over the skies of Central Park and of New York, kind of looking up into that.
Yeah, I remember opening night was so crazy because it was a full moon, and it was like drizzling rain. And right before I had to go on stage to find Caesar dead, I was eating a candy and I broke my tooth all the way through. And the light went off to go. It's like, yes, and we go. But it was, yeah. You know, Shakespeare always takes some bones from me. It's funny. I've lost teeth. I've cracked ribs. Like Shakespeare always takes a pound of flesh every time I do it. Something goes. He takes something from me.
Really is theatrical gymnastics. I mean, the level of emotional, physical, and vocal commitment required for Shakespeare is absolutely wild. Can I ask, though I would be happy to continue digressing, I am curious about the other side of the coin. So it's just an incredibly compelling look at the real side of Mark Antony, at the completely pure, undiluted side of Mark Antony. We also do meet Mark Antony, as you said, as sort of this fun, charismatic person. And then later as quite a, not as talented as Octavius, as we learn in a later play, but quite a talented politician and leader in his own right, and in their own right. Where did you play as a woman playing a general in a male-dominated society and all of that stuff? How much did you decide that was Mark Antony performing, and how much of that was just another part of Mark Antony's personality?
I totally, it was just another facet. It was another facet because in my Mark Antony was a raging flirt, and, you know, a partier, and super smart, super quick, super facile. So yes, there was a variance, and this moment of the play was definitely a shift, and it was like it definitely was the curtains pulled back, private moment. This is something, although it grows to a rage, it is a very interior experience of something becoming unleashed in this person because of what has happened. It's also that watching the tragedy of someone grappling with their heart being ripped out, you know, when it's never happened before. So I think it also was the astonishment of feeling this kind of devastation for someone who is incredibly facile and capable and charming and strong and, you know, all of those things, to have their heart ripped out and to feel out of control and feel at a loss, and to feel all of those feelings that he's feeling, that he gives words to, and not have it just be a full, testosterone rage out, but that it be a heartbreak.
Yeah, it's an interesting, another sort of facet I hadn't thought through is this idea of this guy is a hero in almost more than Julius Caesar, who we sort of know as having these physical weaknesses and all of these other things. Mark Antony has always been sort of shown to be a hero, even a tragic one in Antony and Cleopatra, even when he falls. And so, right, what does a hero do? Someone who's used to being able to solve everything when they across something they can't solve.
Well, and it's interesting because I've done a lot of work with Brian Dory's over the years for Theater of War. And so I've had the good fortune to work with a lot of warriors and warriors' families. And I've had the good fortune to speak to a lot of the warriors themselves and their husbands and or wives. And we have a lot of misconceptions, those of us who are not in the military, of what heroes feel and how they process their feelings. Because I've had a lot of unbelievably powerful male and female warriors fall to pieces on my shoulder, over the years, and the trauma that they've had to endure and the way those traumas get triggered are very deep and abiding. So that was another thing that I definitely incorporated in my thinking, was the trauma of war, that we, just because someone is strong and powerful and in the military doesn't mean that they don't have the emotional capacity to feel overwhelming grief and tragedy.
Right.
Because this was a battle that I had. I mean, it's interesting because I had this battle a lot in rehearsal as well. I was definitely being encouraged to move away from the emotionality. And I kept saying, no, I want to lean into it. I want to lean into it. I think that's true for my Mark Antony.
Yeah, I for what it's worth, I agree. Both my older brothers are military, and I see that the good ones at least feel it.
Yep.
That they have to, because otherwise they're not good if they don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, on that note, I do think we should open it up to some video questions, if you're okay with a few.
Absolutely.
As we move forward. So for those of you who are on Zoom with me, the way we are doing this is you raise your hand, which if you scroll over the little participants icon, you'll see a little blue hand. And we get, you know what, Musa, even though you went first last time, you were so quick off the mark that I'm going to ask you to start, and I'm going to unmute you, and I would, here we are. Hi, Musa.
Hi, how are you?
Hello.
Oh, this is accidental Northern Lights.
Cool.
You're such an accomplished theater and camera. I've seen your Goneril and your Marlene, and I just swallow. Like, you're amazing in all of it. And I think like everyone else, I'm kind of like scrambling right quick to try to figure out how to act for a camera. And I wonder if you had actually, I was an extra on Swallow when I watched you.
Oh.
Scene with Haley, and it was funny. I thought about it because it seemed like such a private conversation, and then afterward I was like, I was all the way across the room, and I don't know, I just wonder if you could speak to kind of maybe in a sort of technical way, like the kind of adjustments that you make from theater to camera acting. Or
well, they're two completely different forms. It's sort of the different, I often use the example of doing camera work is a lot like playing an acoustic guitar and doing theater is like playing the violin. They're just completely different practices. But one thing that I encourage you, I was incredibly fortunate because I did a lot of theater for a long time, and then I got hired to be a regular on a TV show for a bunch of years, and it was a terrible TV show, but I got to be in front of a camera every day for 4 years, and I just talked to the DP all the time, and I looked through the lens, and I looked at playback, and I learned composition. I learned composition of frame, and that is an actor's friend. And so just looking at what you're doing, because it's really hard to gauge camera. And the thing that will really help you is to understand what is in the frame, because there's so much that's extraneous that we do that in theater is forgiven and fine and often can be a bonus, but on camera, it's a hindrance. So I just encourage you to learn lenses, and learn about frame.
That's so helpful. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Musa, unlike last time, could you actually turn your own video off? Because that'll leave you with that capability. Great. Let's go to Adam Garth. I'm going to request that you turn your video on, which should give you permission to do that. And I'm going to unmute you. So you should be joining us momentarily. Here we are. Hi, Adam.
Thanks. Thank you so much. Wonderful evening. Just asking about the cast in preparation for the production, and honoring the words "cry havoc." So we're dealing with when you're channeling a president who eats, drinks, talks, and shits chaos. How did you guys go about, and command center stage and everything he does?
Yeah.
How did you guys navigate those waters so that each of the cast, would have ample voice in a production where you're trying to cry havoc? Thanks.
Yeah. No, that's a great question. Well, I'll tell you, I really struggled. To the point that I didn't know if I could do the production with that as the template, as it were. I got very confused and went to the mat trying to understand exactly what you're saying. If that is Caesar, how do we build out from there? And how does Mark Antony, why does he love and care and believe and, go where he goes for that person? And that's when I really dug into faith and the sort of cult of personality and being a true believer, and really aligning with just giving over to being a true believer. And I was really on the mat struggling, and my husband, this may or may not be interesting, but it was just my process, was listening to this podcast called Shit Town at the time. And he told me to listen to it. And it's about this man in Alabama, and his name was John B. McLemore. And he was this kind of genius redneck, brilliant man who also lived in this community in Alabama, and spent most of his time socializing at a tattoo parlor, and was very popular with the people in the town, and grew up in the town. And there was this facility with very complicated language that this man had, and he was able to repair clocks, all kinds of clocks. He had this innate mechanical genius, and also this deep well of like blind faith and sort of American heart that was incredibly helpful to me to make sense of Mark Antony. I don't know if that's helpful to you, but.
Well, I mean, I just to because of course for a little peek behind the curtain, everyone, we actually considered making this entire podversation be somewhat about this question, and after talking with Beth a little bit and realizing like she figured out a way how not to judge a character for loving the character they do, how to find the way. So it was a wonderful question, and Beth, no, I think that was a very clear answer. So thank you. There are 2 more people with their hands raised. I will get to both of them, but I probably won't get to anyone else. So those will be our last 2. Kit, you are up. I'm going to ask you to start your video, and I'm going to unmute you, and you will join us. Hi, Kit.
Hi. Yeah, thanks for doing this. This is great. Yeah, I'm the one who asked the question about Ivo van Hove. I saw, I think, all of the productions that you did with him at the New York Theater Workshop, which were phenomenal. I guess going back to Shakespeare, well, I grew up going to the RSC in Stratford. I lived in England for a while, and then came back and actually found that I preferred international Shakespeare, but given your perspective, unique, I think, having worked with really across the Atlantic to such a deep extent, I was wondering if you could comment on, you know, how American Shakespeare really, there's that relationship with, you know, England as supposedly the keeper of the Shakespeare flame, and how that relates to your work.
Well, that may be the topic for a whole nother podcast.
Come back.
No. I mean, it's a great and very complicated question for American stage actors, because, you know, we spend our careers fighting the second-class citizenry of being Americans, and, you know, it's silly and sometimes self-imposed, and you know, I think the biggest challenge that we face in America with text work is that there's a lot of disparity of experience, and there's never enough time. So it's another, you know, my mantra, my way of working is always come in with your work done, do your work, know your lines, do your text work, you know. Of course, then you begin the company work, the collective work, the group work, but do your work, and then you can engage, because there's no fucking time. And I think that that's something that I don't know if it's not always taught or not encouraged enough. But I do often find when I do a play, the majority of people have not begun their work when the work begins. And that's a challenge. That's a challenge.
Thank you, Kit.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll take care of your mute if you can knock out your video. Teamwork. Great. Amir, I'm going to ask you to turn your video on, and I'm going to unmute you. Here we are. Hi, Amir.
Hi, how are you?
Hello.
Good. Thank you so much, Beth, for doing this. Really appreciate it.
Sure.
I couldn't help but think of your amazing President Keane last night as I was watching the finale of Homeland. How amazing you were in that.
Thank you.
I had a quick question about the two funeral speeches that Antony has, the one about Caesar, but then the one about Brutus at the very end of the play as well. And I was wondering if you, because he has that famous line, "This was the noblest Roman of them all." And I'm wondering if you and the director talked about the carryover from the funeral oration for Caesar to the
Mhm.
funeral oration for Brutus at the end of the play.
Yeah. I mean, it's a direct echo. Absolutely. And purposeful. You know, it's certainly clearly a journey and the bookend and the same language. So yeah, I mean, I again, I go back to the word heart, because I think Mark Antony's heart is stirred in that moment and feels his heart is full towards another dead man at his feet, you know? And I think I think it's true. I don't think it's political. I don't think it's, you know, manipulative. I think it's true.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Sure.
you. If you could turn your video off, Amir, that would be great. And then Beth, I'm just going to finish with one question that came up on the chat, just because I like it. I think it's a good way to finish. This is from Violet, and Violet, I'm going to do us all a favor and not attempt to pronounce your last name. But she's asking if you think it's more impactful to adapt Shakespeare to modern times, or for it to stay in original practice. I would add to that, or does it depend on the situation and the concept?
Yeah, I mean, I think where you said it is, to me, irrelevant. That's just for the designers. Of course, space matters and how you move in space matters, but I don't think, you know, for me, being in modern dress as Mark Antony made no difference than if I had been in a toga. It really would not have changed my mindscape or what was motivating the language. That is all.
Right. And he is universal. He wrote for all time.
All
So
time,
yeah,
all time. And when you're doing it, you feel the vertigo of all time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that is a great positive way to end, because I think we all agree, if we're watching this show, if we're watching this Podversation, I'm going to guess that we all agree that Shakespeare is for all time. Thank you, Beth. That is all the time we have. Everybody, if you enjoyed the program tonight, please do let us know via email at feedback@redbulltheater.com or the Facebook comment section. If you didn't enjoy the program tonight, please only let us know via feedback and not live chat. And actually, just for the fun of it, if this is doable, the people here on Zoom with me, if you can figure out the tech of it, could you all just turn on your videos and wave, just for us to feel the sense of Shakespeare community that survives 400 years? Thank you all. Now keep waving as I run through this final stuff. If you are able, please do consider making a tax-deductible donation to support Red Bull and invest in the vitality of classical theater for a contemporary audience. We are committed to continuing connection during this time of COVID-19, and your support will help make that possible. We are also thrilled to announce a special Facebook Live event this Thursday at 2 p.m. We'll be celebrating the award season and our production of Shakespeare's Mac Space Beth. The show has received a Lortel Award nomination for Best Revival and a Drama Desk Award nomination for Direction, Scene Design, and Revival of Play. We'll be welcoming director Erica Schmidt, scenic designer Catherine Cornell, and members of the cast, including Isabel Furman and Ishmenia Mendez. 2 o'clock this Thursday on Facebook Live. Also, please remember to check in next Monday at 7:30 when our Red Bull Theater Live program continues with The Witch of Edmonton, reuniting most of the cast of Red Bull's celebrated 2011 off-Broadway production. See, I told you we were doing a lot of stuff. Once more, thank you all. This has been Red Bull Theater's RemarkaBULL Podversations. I'm your host, Nathan Winkelstein. We end fittingly with Titinius. The sun of Rome is set, our day is gone. Clouds, dews, and dangers come, our deeds are done.